Beijing says it's easing COVID-19 policy following nationwide protests, but some reports showing just the opposite. Anti-lockdown demonstrators cropping up across China, getting dispersed by police. We spoke to one protester who's voicing her determination. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo saying Beijing is trying to game the system, adding Washington must rethink how it protects national security interests. And Europe stuck in a dilemma over its biggest trade partner and systemic rival, now looking to reduce its dependence on China while asking the world's biggest market to open more sectors to European companies. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Changes appear to be trickling into Chinese policy centered around COVID-19 controls. As of Thursday, authorities abruptly lifted restrictions in some mega cities, including Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Chongqing. One community in the capital, Beijing, also allowed COVID-19 patients with mild symptoms to isolate at home rather than at a quarantine facility or hotel. The shift comes as China sees unprecedented mass protests against its contentious zero COVID-19 policy. What's more, a top Chinese health official acknowledged for the first time that the COVID-19 Omicron variant's ability to cause disease was weakening. Vice Premier Sun Chunlan also didn't use the term dynamic COVID-0 in a national health meeting. The term used to describe China's quest to quash outbreaks and eliminate COVID-19. Instead, Xi announced that the country was facing a new situation and encouraged the elderly to get vaccinated. But could it be that China is beginning to shift away from its zero COVID-19 policy? Recent reports have surfaced showing contradictory messages. First, the eastern China's Shandong province announced a new plan on Wednesday. That's to invest more than $3 billion to build makeshift hospitals with over 200,000 beds. But the announcement is raising public concerns. One comment under the report says the move could mean that the COVID-19 policy will not change for many years to come. The same day, an audio recording ricocheted across Chinese social media. In it, an 18-year-old girl from Gansu province in northwest China is heard questioning staff in a makeshift hospital. The outburst came after staff ignored her requests for medicine. And in northeastern China's Liaoning province, city officials published a notice Thursday saying it would be, in their words, a shame not to insist on a zero COVID-19 policy when it has the potential for success. The Chinese Communist Party often blames so-called foreign anti-China forces for triggering unrest in China. In a protest in Beijing over the weekend, an unknown person tried to stop people from protesting, saying there were foreign anti-China forces in play. Some Beijing residents responded. In a clip circulating online, one citizen asked how so-called foreign forces would be able to get in touch with protesters, as they can neither go abroad nor visit foreign websites due to Beijing's censorship. Another protester took a different perspective, saying the founders of communism, Marx and Engels, and Russian communists Stalin and Lenin, are the real foreign forces who infiltrated in China. Another demonstrator explained they only want freedom. With police out in force quashing anti-lockdown dissenters in China, how are protesters coping? One of them says she won't give up, as public anger and demands for change now have reached a breaking point. Here's her story.
I feel like my blood is boiling.
That's Wang recalling the scene from one of the biggest protests that erupted in Shanghai over the weekend. To protect her identity, we gave her a pseudonym and altered her voice. Part of the crowd there, She and her boyfriend were demonstrating against Beijing's strict COVID-19 measures. The current outpouring comes as 1.4 billion Chinese citizens are experiencing a third year of strict lockdowns, mandatory mass testing, and enforced quarantine. Such protests have spread across China, from major eastern cities to minority regions in the far west. During some protests, citizens gathered, calling for the Chinese Communist Party to step down. That's until police started to arrest protesters at the sites.
In the short time I was there, I saw at least 3 people being arrested. Many people were arrested earlier and the day before.
Shanghai police clashed with protesters on Saturday. Officers began arresting people in the early morning. It's unclear how many have been arrested, but a Shanghai protester said 80 to 110 people were detained on Saturday night alone.
We will continue to protest. This is not a solution to the problem at all. It will only make everyone angrier.
Wang says tyranny cannot be endured forever, and eventually outpourings of dissent will occur, sooner or later.
A top official in Washington now describing China as an emerging threat to national security, U.S. companies, and American workers. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo gave the description on Wednesday. Speaking at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Raimondo said Beijing has made clear it's moving away from economic growth and shifting toward national security. That's coupled with assertive military behavior. She went on to say that means Washington must rethink how it protects national security interests and promotes trade and investment interests. Raimondo stated China is attempting to game the global system to spread Chinese influence, something she said poses risks to the freedom of information and data privacy. She added the U.S. should be using every tool in its toolbox to protect companies and counter unfair economic practices. The head of the world's biggest military alliance is warning countries to avoid being dependent on China. He points to the war in Ukraine and Europe's dependency on Russia as reasons why. At the Berlin Security Conference on Thursday, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Western countries will continue to trade with China, but they must reduce their vulnerabilities.
We need to realize that when we engage economically with authoritarian powers like Russia on gas, or like with China on some critical commodities, rare earth minerals, for instance, it has consequences for our securities. So these decisions cannot only be made based on commercial considerations.
Stoltenberg added that if authoritarian regimes see that force is rewarded, the world will become a much more dangerous place. China, the European Union's biggest trade partner and a systemic rival. When European Council President Charles Michel met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing on Thursday, he sought to balance the two sides. Here's more on his trip.
During his one-day visit to China, he expressed his union's wish for more exports to the world's second-largest economy. But he was also firm with Beijing in the defense of democracy and fundamental freedoms. Michel pressed China to open up more sectors to European companies while seeking to reduce dependency on China.
On the European side, market access remains very open, while in China, several sectors remain much more closed. We need greater reciprocity. We need a more balanced relationship with no overdependencies, a real level playing field for our companies.
Earlier this year, the EU described China as an economic competitor and a systemic rival. As for the Ukraine war, Michel once again urged Beijing to take action.
I urged President Xi, as we did at our EU-China summit in April, to use his influence on Russia to respect the UN Charter.
Michel added that during his talks with Xi, he had raised the issue of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and rights of minorities. He didn't specifically mention the protests emerging in China in recent days. Chinese state media Xinhua news agency reported that Xi Jinping told Michel to continue investing in China and to oppose economic decoupling. Next, a show of unity between the U.S. and France.
President Joe Biden welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday for a 3-day stay. It's Biden's first time hosting a formal state visit during his presidency. The two world leaders are expected to strengthen the Franco-American friendship aimed at countering common threats from Russia and China. The first thing on the French leaders' agenda is to seek U.S. relief for European companies. That's as Western allies are facing intense competition from China. Macron will also try to negotiate U.S. exemptions for European companies. As for the China question, Macron says he is exploring a third way on China that's neither confrontational nor naive. On the other hand, Biden has urged his fellow NATO leaders to stand up to China's authoritarianism and growing military might. For the U.S., France is a key ally in countering China's threat in the Indo-Pacific. France is the only EU power with a presence in the region, with around 7,000 military personnel and several military bases stationed there. A White House spokesperson noted the two countries' common ground, saying France is at the center of almost every single national security issue that matters to the American people. An update on a major lawsuit tied to Hong Kong media tycoon and Beijing critic Jimmy Lai. Hong Kong authorities withheld a top British human rights lawyer's application for visa extension on Thursday. Timothy Owen is set to represent Jimmy Lai. Lai faces charges under the city's Beijing-imposed national security law. The Hong Kong court postponed the trial to December 13th, owing to the visa delay. Hong Kong's Department of Justice has repeatedly tried to prevent the British lawyer from representing Lai. Lai is one of Hong Kong's most prominent critics of China's Communist Party. Lai's case is being closely watched by the public, legal community, and diplomats. The newspaper he founded, Apple Daily, shut down last summer after authorities raided its offices, arrested staff, and froze assets. Signs that Beijing may be secretly supplying weapons to Russia. Ukrainian media Defense Express says Russian cargo planes fly to China almost every day. Let's take a closer look.
Some planes even turned off transponders to avoid being tracked. The past week saw around 10 such flights. These planes reportedly belong to Russia's Volga-Dnipro Airlines. The Moscow-based company ships oversized and heavyweight air cargo. Chinese footage shows one such Russian plane landing at the airport in China's Zhengzhou city. The video says the plane was coming to pick up military equipment. Zhengzhou is a major logistics and industrial center. It's also home to the production facilities of Chinese defense giant Norinco.
The Chinese Communist Party is touting its management of environmental issues, but a recent report paints a very different picture. During the CCP's National Congress meeting in October, a top climate official trumpeted the party's ecological protections over the past decade, calling the advances unprecedented. But is that the real story? A Chinese journalist seems to be revealing just the opposite. Reporter Zhao Lanjian told the Epoch Times that China's environmental concerns remain at alarming levels. He named 3 major ills underlying Beijing's environmental policies. The first is what he called the predatory exploitation of nature reserves. Zhao criticized Beijing for plundering and overdeveloping natural landscapes for quick commercial success. He drew comparisons with scenic spots in other countries.
I have visited ecological parks in many countries, such as the United States and Chile, where people are not allowed to build roads nor develop commercial tourism. However, China puts the tourist economic model as its first priority, puts tourism revenue from selling tickets as its first priority.
According to Zhao, the second problem is river desertification that's hurting water supplies. Zhao spent 10 years investigating China's 2 longest rivers, the Yangtze River and the Yellow River. He noticed reduced water flow in many of their waterways.
The cutoff of such water systems will also affect the development of agriculture, animal husbandry, and fisheries along the rivers. Therefore, no matter how good the regime's slogans are about these environmental issues, the reality is visible to everyone.
China's water conditions continue to plummet in recent years. In 2018, Zhao took a field trip to Tibet and the surrounding area. He found deserts there, areas he was shocked to learn were largely swamps just 30 years ago. The region he visited is the birthplace of both the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. It was once known as the Chinese Water Tower. But its draining has led to water shortages along the entire Yangtze River system, including China's financial hub, Shanghai. In 2014, Zhao reported on pollution in a desert in northwest China, where a paper company was dumping untreated wastewater into a river. But his reports were soon removed from the internet. Meanwhile, massive anti-pollution demonstrations broke out all over China, though all have fallen under the Communist Party's crackdown efforts. But Zhao is still sounding the alarm.
The destruction of the entire natural environment in China, the destruction of tourism resources, and the destruction of ecological resources may not be able to be recovered in the next few decades or even the next several hundred years.
He cautions that China's environmental data isn't objective, as the country's evaluation system is controlled by the regime. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. After the death of China's former leader Jiang Zemin, the name of a Chinese spiritual group became a trending keyword on Twitter, Falun Gong. Back in 1999, Jiang started a nationwide persecution campaign against the meditation system. 100 million Chinese people have been impacted. Levi Browdy, executive director of the Falun Dafa Information Center, spoke to NTD Good Morning's host Evelyn Lee about what's happened. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.